Welcome to the third session of the five-year period from 2009 to 2014. Let's start with a recap of the second session. So in the second session, I covered running and living, which was one of the things that Anita got involved in, and the other was Let's Do It Delhi. So both these stories are quite interesting. So if you want to learn about them, please see the previous session. So in this session, we're going to start off with India Against Corruption, which was a movement started by Anna Hazare and Arvind Kejriwal in 2011. We saw this on Facebook and we went to the very initial sessions along with the people who were trying to organize this. And some of the first meetings of this movement were held in our home. We were involved with India Against Corruption even before the first fast that Anna Hazare did in Jantar Mantar. And then we tried to do a lot of things to help this movement take off by trying to use our contacts, get corporates involved, and try and do whatever we could. We also had traveled to the US because of a prior trip that had been booked, where we were going to whitewater raft on the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. But before we went on that trip, we spent a few days at Princeton University talking about India Against Corruption. And it so happened that there was a person who was doing a PhD on corruption in India. So we connected all these people with the movement. And then we did this trip and then came back and then again got involved. And I remember doing a fair amount of work on trying to study how corruption had been eliminated in Hong Kong and whether that model could be used in India. Because one of the things which was becoming clear to me, and that's what really transpired, was that even if this Lokpal bill, as it was called, was passed, and it was good, then would it really make a difference in corruption? And what would be the model? How would the Lokpal be funded? Or would it just be a toothless tiger? So I was very keen on getting a model which was going to make a really significant dent. But I soon realized that Arvind Kejriwal was more someone who had a view that it was either my way or the highway. And he wasn't really looking for input. He wasn't looking for suggestions. And I found that his DNA and my DNA did not match very much. So I kind of distanced myself. Anita stayed on for a little longer, but then when the Aam Aadmi Party got sort of created, we were also involved a little bit in some where we were invited to donate money to the party. And that was the time when we met a person called Sunny Naran, and I'm mentioning him because we became good friends and he'd been involved along with Nitin Chaudhary and some of the stuff that we've done. It's very important to have these kind of people who become good friends and get involved and are people who can bring you down to earth and also help you along in whatever disruptive stuff that you're trying to do. So that was the story of India Against Corruption and our involvement with it. We went and we saw some of the tear gassing, lathi charges, and so on and so forth. And we also saw how, a movement can be hijacked or it can transform into a political party, go through all kinds of drama. And, the jury is still out on what the Aam Aadmi Party will do. But if we are to look at it with a dispassionate lens, just as an observer, then we must say that we are kind of a little disappointed with the promise that the Aam Aadmi Party held and the India Against Corruption movement held. And 10 years later, what the reality is. So another thing that we got involved in was the ward transformation project. So we said that, look, we want to make sustainable change happen in India, and why can't we transform a one ward to make it like Singapore? So we started saying that, okay, maybe we need to find a political backing. So Anita talked to about 28 councillors out of 273 before she hit upon a person called Mr. Manjinder Singh Sirsa, who headed Ward 103. And he was quite keen to work with Anita. He gave her a power of attorney for her to do the kind of development work on his behalf, and he would do the politicking. And we started off on this incredible project to try and make Ward 103 Madhipur, like Singapore. So one of the things was, could we make it slum free, and then could we use urban architects to build a plan which would transform this whole area, and how could we get residents involved? How could we use some of the funds that the central government provides? So we did a lot of work in this area, and we actually came up with plans of how this ward could be totally slum-free, and we looked at all the bottlenecks and things like that, and looked at various things which had been tried in the past, and gave suggestions to the ministry, the Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation Ministry. But there, we didn't get much traction. Our solutions were not necessarily adopted, and we weren't even told why. There was very little enthusiasm to try and solve this problem. We've got UCLA, the University of California, the Los Angeles School of Urban Architecture. They were very keen to participate in this ward transformation project and fly down students to do what they called like a studio project, as long as their airfares could be picked up. They could be given boarding and lodging, or while they were doing the project. We were also trying to involve architectural schools in India, like CEPT in Ahmedabad, the School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi. But what we found was that there was very little enthusiasm even among the residents. Like there was a plan where if, say, 10% was contributed by the residents, then 90% would be contributed by the central government. So, things like if you wanted to have parking structures built, now this project could be financed by a very small equity contribution from the residents, topped up by the government, and then you could raise bonds, which would be financed by the parking fees, and which would pay back the bonds. So all these financing structures and everything could be done, but the whole thing of how people wanted to participate and all that was quite a challenge. And we also found that there was a lot of, in some ways, conflict between people who were renting in the ward and people who were owning in the ward. Because if the ward became like really good, then real estate values of the ward would go up. So it made a lot of sense for owners. But renters were worried that if the ward became really good, the rents would go up. And they were not necessarily all that interested. But anyway, we then worked with the councillor, and when the council elections came up, this ward became a ward which was reserved for women. So Mr. Sirsa couldn't stand, but his wife decided to stand. And we got her to take some measurable time-bound real outcomes, which is a theme we will return to later. Whether it was because of that or because of some of the good work that Mr. Sirsa had done in collaboration with Anita, she won the election with 81% of the vote, which I think till now is a record that has never been beaten and had never been achieved in the past. So, the moral of the story is that, you know, things in India can be transformed, but we need the right kind of structures, the right kind of incentives, and we have to be able to sell a vision, a story to people, and they have to buy it and not be apathetic. So I became an advisor to HUDCO, which basically is also involved in urban transformation and basically gives loans to cities or projects for that. So it's like gives a very, very large number of large value loans to state governments and city administrations. And it issues bonds, both taxable and tax-free, to finance these loans. Uh, so the chairman was a person called V.P. Paligar, and he was a classmate of mine in IIT Mumbai. And he was like the silver medalist, that is, he was from civil engineering, and he basically taught the civil engineering department in our batch. So though I was a mechanical engineer, I knew him a little bit when we were in IIT Mumbai, but I caught up with him. And he heard about all the work and he said, why don't you come and help me? Can you help me on a pro bono basis? I want to try and make my organization quite innovative. And I was also thought it was quite fascinating and that I would learn a lot. And that did happen. I sort of understood. And I realized that HUDCO had tremendous amount of potential. It would probably needed to be 10, 15 times the size it was. And it needed to kind of demand urban transformation as a condition of giving loans and giving the loans in tranches based on the revenue that the city would generate so that it could pay back and really transform. Because many of the cities had master development plans and so on and so forth, but there were no real outcomes that you could track. So we did a few of these projects and we picked two cities like Ajmer and Gwalior. And Gwalior was the city that I was born in, and it has tremendous tourist potential, such as does the city of Ajmer. So we kind of tried to work with these two cities, but again, the whole thing fell through. And then we noticed a very strange thing, that a lot of people who were part of, say, the core innovation team were very reluctant to be part of that team because they said, well, this chairman and managing director wants to talk of innovation, but his time is limited. After a few years, he'll go, and then what will happen to our career? So they didn't want to really stick their neck out, take any kind of risk. They would rather do business as usual. So as far away from being innovative as possible. And everybody was trying to say why something innovative would not succeed rather than trying to make something innovative succeed. Now later, in May of 2017, HUDCO did an initial public offering and issued a fair amount of its stock to the public, while still the government retained control with over 51% of the stock, but it divested some of the government's ownership to the public. Now, at that time, when it did an IPO, it was, a lot of people said, yes, yes, you must subscribe and all that. But if you look at the performance in the 3 years since the IPO, it has been pathetic. And the stock has a CAGR of minus 27%. So some of this I could have predicted because, if you have an organization which has a fair amount of problems and it is not focused on growth, it is not innovative, it is basically bureaucratic and stuck, then it is very unlikely that its stock is going to do well. And that is what has transpired. And now with COVID, it's probably going to be even worse. So the people who did buy HUDCO stock are probably ruining the fact that they bought the HUDCO stock. But this, again, is kind of illustrative of the problems that exist in the public sector in India, where a lot of the potential is not realized and you don't have the incentive to perform. So this is slowly being corrected. I think in the latest set of reforms, the government has said that all sectors are going to be opened up to the private sector, except for very few strategic sectors, if any. And in each sector, there won't be more than 1 to 4 public sector firms. So gradually, the role of the private sector is being increased and the role of the public sector is being decreased. And maybe if the public sector can have the right kind of incentives, then it can actually do pretty well. But we shall see. So that is all for this session. Thank you for listening to me, and the story continues in the next session.